In this video, we're going to show you how to take advantage of the Replenish Inventory functionality inside Sage Intacct. There's going to be 3 areas that you're going to need to get into to configure before we start showing you that workflow. Let's jump right in. First thing you're going to want to do is go right into your top level and go into the Inventory Controls area and go into Configuration. Once you're in there, you're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom. You'll see the replenishment area is near the bottom of the inventory configuration. It'll have a heading called replenishment, and you want to make sure that that's checked as turned on, so you can go ahead and set that up from here. Now, there are various methods to do replenishment inside Sage Intacct Inventory. This video is going to focus specifically just on the reorder point method. We will be making some videos at a later point on some of the other forecasting options, but in this video, you're going to want to make sure that you just check this on as reorder point. And what's nice with the replenishment in Sage Intacct for inventory is what you can do is you could determine which purchasing transaction definition or document that you want to create when you generate your reorder. So you may have some pre-configuration to do before you get to this point. If you haven't configured your purchase order document definitions yet, you're going to want to do that. So any definition that you've created over in the purchasing module will show up over here. You'll notice I created one specifically for stock orders called purchase orders for stock. So that's the one that I'm going to link to. And so basically when we get into the workflow, when we generate the reorder, it's going to automatically send and create purchase order documents right over into this area in Sage Intacct. You do have one option here. You can determine to say, all right, when I generate my reorder, generate it for items for every warehouse or just for warehouses that are listed specifically in the item setup. So for example, you might have multiple warehouses, but this one particular item is only used in warehouse A. Well, there's no reason to try and order it for warehouse B. So usually we leave this checked off and only replenish it for an item that has a warehouse listed inside the item. And I'll show you where that is in a second. The next area to go into for configuration is to go into your warehouse location. So if I go again up into inventory at top level, I have warehouses. Now, typically these are going to be set up at top level. Your instance, you may have decided to set up your warehouse as an entity. So just make sure you're in the correct level as far as where you need to set up these items in the system. So we're going to go into our warehouse list. So regardless if you have one warehouse or multiple warehouses, you're going to want to come into here and do some configuration on those warehouses. So in my database, you'll see here I have some main warehouse locations, and then I have some truck stock that I want to track inventory on. So in this case, when I'm doing reorders, I only want to reorder for my main warehouses, and then from there, I'll distribute the items into the trucks. So what you can do is inside this warehouse, you're going to hit edit here. And for Nebraska, you could check a box here, make sure this box is checked that you're going to enable replenishment for this warehouse. Obviously, if you don't have this checked, when you go to replenish, you're not going to have this warehouse as an option. So it's just a little button to make sure that's working. Also, you'll see in my workflow example later in this video, we're also going to send Mike Tracy an email saying, hey, you have a new replenishment request via a smart event. So you might want to set up a manager or whoever you want to use to get notifications on new purchase orders that were created. This is one area you can pull the email address from in your automatic notifications. And then you can also elect, I didn't do it, but you can also elect here, like for your truck stock, when I hit edit, I might not want to turn that on for that. So I can turn off then replenishment. And then the last area to go into configuration is where the majority of your setup's going to be is in the item record itself. So again, typically this is going to be at top level, but there may be scenarios where yours is at entity level. And you'll know because if you don't have the edit button, it typically means you're at the wrong level. But if I go into my item lists and inventories here, you can have set up some multiple views where maybe I just want to see certain items, but you have your list of your items here, and obviously this is going to only pertain to inventory item types. I just have some 2x4 lumbers here. If I go into edit, we're going to be able to do some configuration for the replenishments directly in this item. So as I scroll through the item, if you take a quick look at the general tab all the way down at the bottom, here's where you can list the warehouses that are associated with that item. So you'll notice here that I do have this item in Nebraska, and this is where that one button was looking at. It's saying, hey, I'm only going to replenish for warehouses that are on this item record. Okay, so you can add this if you need to be, but if the warehouse is not on this item record, it's not going to try and replenish to a truck warehouse, for example. The tab that you're going to be on for your reorder point is going to be over in the vendor history tab, and you'll notice a section here for replenishment. So you're going to want to make sure that you enable replenishment for this item by checking it off. And then you could do default unit of measure for when you order. I'm just going to leave it on each. And you'll notice a few different fields that you have the option to fill out. One field here is called safety stock. Basically, you'll notice here what I'm saying is all right, I want to trigger a reorder when I get down to my inventory on hand of 800. You can have a safety stock that says, well, I also want to make sure I have at least 10 emergency items available. So what that'll do is that'll make your true reorder point 810, okay? Most people usually just leave this at 0 and then just make this your legit reorder point. You'll notice your replenishment method you do want to make sure is on reorder point. Again, we'll talk about the other methods at a later time, but you want to make sure you're going to do reorder point for this item. You can also select a default quantity that'll pre-fill in. When you do reorder, what's the quantity you want to reorder? Typically, we want to order at least 2,000 items or more. You can have that pre-fill in. You will see where you'll be able to override that during the generation, but this is a default that'll pre-fill in for you. You can also set up maximum, so the system will give you an error if you try and order too much. We don't want to have too much inventory on stock, so you can set up these maximums. Not required, but you can actually set them up here. Now, when we get into generating the reorder, there's different methods that you can have the vendor pre-fill for. There's a preferred vendor method, which will look here for the checkbox. There's also best cost and the last order you got. You can have it pre-fill different ways, but you can list your vendors here. They will add to this list automatically as you order from the vendors, but you could flip your preferred vendor and it can look down here as well. Now, if you have one warehouse, this is basically as detailed as you need to go when you're configuring your replenishment. This is for an overall default for this item. If you have multiple warehouses, you can actually set up different replenishment rules for each warehouse. So to do that, you would go back to the general tab. And if you go back down to the warehouse list that we saw earlier and click on a line for a warehouse that you want to configure, for Nebraska, for example, I can click Show Details. In here, it will give you an option to override your replenishment values from the History tab. And in this case, we do have it checked off because I have specific rules that I want to have for the Nebraska warehouse. So for the Nebraska warehouse, I want my reorder point when Nebraska gets to 600, and I want to order 2,000, no more than 4,000, and I have a reorder point. So the same field you saw on the main screen, but you can also have different preferred vendors based on what warehouse you're at. Maybe they're closer to you, there's better shipping, lead times, and things like that. So you can see here, I have a vendor set up here, and I can actually fill out some information on it. Another nice, neat thing you can do here, you can notice, hey, when I order from this vendor, Lumber Supply, they have a minimum order requirement. Their minimum order is 2,005 units. Notice I want to order 2,000, but their minimum is 5 over. So I just set that up so you can see that in action when we get to the next step. Okay, so you can go ahead and fill that out. And then you would click Save. And that would I'm going to hit cancel here because I must have filled something out wrong. That would complete your configuration for reorder point. At this point, we're ready to go and do it and test it out. So again, this typically is going to be ran at top level. Usually when you're managing inventory, your warehouses are maybe across entities, and who's ever managing these might manage multiple warehouses, things like that. But your configuration could be different, but I'm going to go in here at top level, and you'll notice under inventory control, you should see an area here under all called replenish. One thing you do want to make sure before you get into this is that you have the correct security set up for the users to be able to do this. So make sure that if you're configuring this for the first time, that you go look at your user subscriptions and make sure the roles have all of these features set up for it. I do. So I'm going to go ahead and here under inventory control, and I'm actually going to click on replenish inventory. You could favorite this. You could put it on a dashboard. But if I click on replenish inventory, that's going to take us into the replenish inventory screen. You have a lot of different settings that you can turn on and off here. You have what's called reorder options. Notice it pre-fills in the default transaction definition. For some reason, for this particular case, you need to go to a different transaction definition. You are allowed to override that on the fly here and override the deliver to address. So which warehouse address is it going to? It's going to default to our main location here. And what is your date of this order? So we're going to order it as of today. As you come into here, what will happen is you'll have the ability to do this as of a date. And what do you want your vendor order option to be? We want it on preferred vendor, last vendor item, lowest price, shortest lead time. Depending on your priorities, you can have some changes here. And if that's it, you just want to do a general reorder, you can just hit apply filters, and that will show you all the items down here that are eligible. But when you're ordering, you might want to do specific things. Maybe I just want to order for one particular entity or company, or maybe I just want to order for one particular warehouse. So you have all these drop-down lists here that you can use to filter down your reorders. So in this case, I just want to order for the Nebraska warehouse. So I'm a manager in Nebraska. I'm just concerned with that warehouse. I want to select Nebraska. And at this point, I just want to say, show me all the items that are ready to be reordered for Nebraska. I'll click apply filters. When I do that, down at the bottom here, you'll see all of the items in your inventory that are eligible to be reordered. Then to make this screen a little bigger, you could minimize some of these other options, the filters, and you can see many items here in your system. So you'll notice here, the one that we've been working at is the 2x4 lumber. It pre-filled in the vendor. It basically says you need your current inventory is 600. The quantity to purchase, notice, is 2005 because that vendor had a minimum requirement. If we change the vendor, that could change the quantity to purchase. You always have the ability to override and say, what, we're just going to do 3,000 today. You can override that there. And as you're managing this, depending on who's managing getting the pricing for this, you could fill the pricing in here. Or you can elect to leave the pricing out here. And then when you generate the POs, if you have a different person in charge of your purchasing, that can trigger that individual to get those POs and get pricing on them before they issue the POs. So you can do it either way. I'll go ahead and put a purchase price in here. Let's say it's $5.05. And what's really nice is if you have multiple items, which you probably will in most cases, you can create purchase orders all at the same time. If you have 10 items here and there's 10 different vendors, you can select them all at the same time. And when you click create purchase orders, that's going to generate 10 different purchase orders for 10 different vendors. You don't have to key those in manually, which is really the big plus for doing it this way. But in this case, I just have one. So I'll go ahead and do that. Now you can do a preview. You can do what's called snapshot. So you can do a preview of here's what it's going to be, and then follow up on that with reporting and coming into here and do it later. But we're just going to go ahead and generate the purchase order. So I got my vendors, I got my items selected here, and I'm going to click create purchase order. And when I do that, that automatically generated all the purchase orders over in the purchasing module. You can get a view here of the replenishment run that just happened. And this would give you a recap of all of the POs that were created. And you notice right here, it lists the PO that was just generated, and there might be multiple here. I don't know if you heard it on my email, but I just got triggered for an email. And so what I did as well is I set up a smart event that said, hey, whenever I do a replenishment inventory run, generate an email to the manager of that inventory that says, hey, there's a new PO created. So what I'll do is I'll open it up. I didn't make it very pretty, but you get the idea. Here's a basic email, and you can make this, a little bit better. But basically I said, hey, a new purchase order was created for an inventory replenish. And here's the number. And whoever is responsible for that, there's even a link here where you can click right on this and it will take you right back into the purchase order. So we'll go ahead and let that in, and that would take them right into Intacct and right into the area that was just generated as a purchase order. Okay. And then they can edit it here. And if the pricing changed or they need to add some things on this or change some shipping information, they can go ahead and do that. And then they can print and post and do their purchase orders. And just to show you how that looks here, where that is that directly over in the purchasing module created a purchase order for stock. And there's that one we just created here. And then from this point on, you would follow your normal purchasing workflow for inventory, basically convert it to a receipt that can issue into inventory and so forth. So the replenishing inventory functionality directly inside Sage Intacct can give you some nice tools out of the box, not much customization, not much setup required to kind of help streamline that purchasing process for you in more real time and less keystrokes.